So when I thought I might end the conference, I decided to put everything that I think you heard wrong into one deck, and hopefully spur some debate. So first of all, about the education landscape, it's no surprise to you, we've talked about it, that in higher ed, colleges are running out of room. Tuition has gone up well over even the housing bubble, which is that red line, over the past 30 years. And meanwhile, the US universities, research universities here, have lost half their market share globally over the past 15 years. And we'll lose half of what's left over the next 15. So this is our 5th largest service export, but we have increasing competition in Asia and South America. Two quick notes around that I think are interesting. First, this is for the University of California system, but it's pretty true nationally. In 1995, there were twice as many faculty, professors, as there were administrators. And now the lines have crossed, actually. What's driving the cost of higher ed are three things. One, just the lack of productivity growth in all education, right? So 100 years ago, a professor or a teacher with 20 students or 30 students, and flash forward 100 years, you've got a professor or a teacher with 100 students. No productivity growth. You're going to get more expensive than inflation every year by 2%, sort of compounding. But then on top of that, we're adding a lot of burdens to our universities, making them very complex kind of beings, and that adds a lot of cost. And also, the faculty back even 15 years ago were teaching substantially more courses than they're teaching today, as there's more research relative to teaching going on at universities. And so as we think about how to attack the higher ed market, I would put it to you that go where the problem is there. One of the solutions to it, the obvious solution is online education and technology. When universities, especially great universities, looked at that space, though, all they saw were subprime educators. And it really scared them off. And when they looked at this space, they realized to build something really good, something worthy of the university, the graduate programs we built are 10 to 15 million bucks a pop. Where are you going to get that money on a fairly speculative venture? To do that, to scale up and make that expense make sense, requires some recruiting on a global level. You can't simply take the kids you would have rejected. With the exception of a handful of colleges, those kids aren't as good as the ones you did. If you simply open the doors, you're going to drive down your reputation. So you've got to find a lot more applicants and qualified applicants. The technology used by most universities is still kind of terrible. Blackboard was built to flank classroom instruction. Nothing was built to replace the campus. And so technology is a real barrier. But the biggest barrier, going back to that other slide, the biggest barrier is you can't do this small and you can't do this bad. You have to build online programs that are every bit as good as your classroom programs, or you're going to destroy the reputation of the school. So going online requires a real suspension of disbelief that we can build something great, and therefore we're going to jump in with both feet, invest heavily, put our best faculty members against it, and build something. And that was a pretty big barrier. The bigger risk, of course, is doing nothing, right? All the best bookstores are pretty much gone. Every so often I see a Kickstarter campaign to save one or two of them. But the option of standing still, the option of continuing to have expenses in both K-12 and higher ed rise at 3 points higher than inflation, or 4 points higher than inflation, it's just not an option. Meanwhile, back in K-12, 30 years since the Rising Tide of Mediocrity report, and yet our schools are dropping, actually, in international rankings. So something's going on. I would put it to you that K-12 schools didn't stop changing in 1984 when that report came out. They really stopped changing in 1904. And there's a reason for that. A stool is an inorganic, whoops. That's a big problem. say, I can flip it on me. That stool is inorganic. If a leg breaks, it's out of business. It doesn't work. We have to go in and fix it. On the other hand, your hand not only heals itself, but if you've got a broken finger, you can kind of work around it. You can use your other fingers and still get done the things you got to get done. Our school systems are inorganic. And there's a reason. It's that everybody hates everybody, right? So no kidding, anybody who's sold to districts, the district people don't trust and are not trusted by the administrators in the schools. The teachers don't trust either the principal or the district folks. The parents don't know who to trust, tend to side with the teachers. The union is kind of its own entity. If anybody walks in the door, if a good idea walks in the door with one of those players, he's immediately opposed by the other players. And you can give me a better reason why K-12 changes so slowly, but so far that's certainly my experience, and I've worked with a bunch of these districts. A lot of people blame the unions. Just a note, I did a study where, building on a Fordham Foundation study, and I did it actually with Steve Hodis, who's here someplace, building on some other work of where are unions strong and weakest. We then looked at NAEP scores and other metrics to say, is there any correlation here? And the answer is, yeah, states with strong unions actually outperform states with weak unions. When you regress out spending per kid and you regress out average income of the state, and you only look at free and reduced lunch kids, they still outperform. Or it's very close, but it's clearly whatever unions, I'm not saying are a solution, but they're not the problem. The problem is crappy management. And the fact is, anybody who has sold to districts, and it's my advice number one, knows that they're the drowning guy who, if you're not really well trained, will drown you. If you're selling into K-12, selling to the parent, selling to the teacher, selling to the school, selling to the network of charter schools are all plausible business models. Selling to the district is a very, very tough road, and it's a road that not only is difficult in and of itself, but you've got some billion-dollar competitors who are pretty talented. In terms of ed tech, the reason for the lack of penetration of ed tech in districts is the same one, that districts aren't built to accept new ways of learning, especially new ways of learning that might require fewer teachers. You'll probably see over the next decade the growth of large networks of charter schools that are hybrid, putting a great deal of pressure on the district schools because the districts won't be able to adopt the model as readily and will have both learning disadvantages, outcomes disadvantages, as well as cost disadvantages. In both higher ed and K-12, the problem that you've got is that your costs are out of scale with your revenues, with your total tuition. There are two ways to solve that problem. You can shrink your costs using technology, or you can raise your revenues. Shrinking costs probably means dumbing down the school and being opposed by faculty and parents and alums. Scale, on the other hand, if you do it right, is on mission. If you can do it right, meaning with increased or at least equal quality, means you've got your costs and revenues in balance, and you're actually furthering your mission, not fighting it. I would put it to you that for a whole bunch of reasons in both K-12 and higher ed, you'll see, as you do in a lot of places that technology has disrupted, tremendous consolidation in both spaces. You'll see fewer players of larger size. In terms of the Moocs, a couple thoughts about these guys. You know, when people think of universities like this one, great professors and students walking around having great conversations. The future of education, and the Moocs are part of it, is that, you know, two students sitting in a coffee shop or a bar in Shenzhen, that's your campus, right? Joined by a professor, then all the better, right? It's not the days of building a campus in Dubai for $1 billion almost never happened. There are a couple schools pursuing it hard, but is already, as far as I'm concerned, over. The days of global campuses that are held at Starbucks is really kind of where the world is going, and certainly the Moocs are part of that. However, in terms of badges, we don't need them. I won't. The life learning, it might be interesting. In a couple of areas like technology, it's vaguely useful to an employer to know that you know HTML5 or Python, but it's not very hard to find out that information with a couple questions, and it's not hard once you are hired to see for himself, or actually do a reference check. But in terms of actual employers looking at MOOC information, looking at badges and so forth to pull together a decision to hire you or fire you, or hire you or not, I think that's a very, very tough road. And the road that the Moocs are on, in a sense, is to end up giving diplomas. But there are already several thousand institutions out there that give diplomas. And here's a much better way of thinking about the Moocs, and I think they will eventually come to this, although right now they're resisting it. The traditional model in school, which everybody here has talked about, there's a textbook, there's a lecture, and then finally you discuss it. And in a flipped model, the lecture is replaced with asynchronous materials, right? And then you come and discuss it. But you think about what the companies are doing. The Moocs are taking their materials, making them more modular, more interactive and collaborative, right? More compelling. The textbook companies are doing exactly the same thing. They're taking their content, making it rich media, modular, interactive, collaborative. Clearly, they're on a collision course. In the end, there's just a bunch of asynchronous materials. The Moocs, in the end, are not competitors of MIT or CUNY. They're competitors of Pearson and McGraw-Hill. And that concept, I think, has actually some interesting business implications for them, and really interesting implications for the ability to drive the cost of a college education. I think in real terms, the people in this room should be able to put together, partnering with a great college, an undergraduate program that's really, really good for $40,000, $50,000 total, not per year. In terms of the tutor and now 2U model, the notion is the core experience, students, faculty, and intellectual property are with the school. These are Georgetown students taught by Georgetown faculty, admitted by the admissions office to Georgetown standards, and the IP is theirs. Around that is online curricular development, which is shared. We embed curricular designers, and all of the school as a service providers work on this basic model. And then all the other stuff, the funding of the program, tech, recruiting, are things that Tutor or Embanet or anybody else is doing. This model makes a lot of sense because the demands of a 24/7 global school. We have, in our teaching program at 2U, students in 40 countries, right? Not from 40 countries, they're in 40 countries. Like, coordinating that is not what universities do, and none of their systems are set up to do it, and so building around that core makes a lot of sense. Very quickly, all of these programs have the same flip model that you know, asynchronous materials, synchronous sessions, synchronous classes that meet all the time, night and day. In class size 10, so if you've got 500 students in a course, you can use 50 different time slots during the week. Really good, collaborative, social learning management systems, and a ton of experiential stuff, stuff going on at your place, student teaching, whatever it is, real-world stuff. 2U at this point, and I left it a couple months ago, has programs with USC Georgetown, a new undergraduate program called Semester Online, which is kind of like Semester Abroad. Students can take courses at Duke and Northwestern and a bunch of good schools for credit while pursuing, hopefully, something really fun and interesting during a semester. One of the things to think about, though, as you go and play with online education, the only expensive part of that model, the only part that has variable expense, is the teaching, is the synchronous classes, right? If we create asynchronous materials, they may be a little expensive, but we're sharing that over 100 kids, over 1,000 kids, over 10,000 kids. At some point, it's a rounding error, The technology, likewise, scales really well. It's the teaching that is the expensive part. What you're going to see, because there are no real standards here, when you hear buzzwords like performance-based learning or outcomes-based, what it really starts driving you towards is a correspondence school model, right? Just learn some stuff on your own, take a test, and you got it. Versus an actual educational experience of students of real quality mingling with each other, sharing with each other, and with high caliber faculty. And I think that question of where you're going to play in the space and how we avoid a race to the bottom as we try to drive down the cost of education, I think is going to be a big thing over the next 10 years. The cost of writing a book is, call it $30,000. You could find somebody to write a book for you. The cost of a video game is now on average $25 million. The cost of making a movie is $65 million. Despite the fact that the tools get better and better, it gets cheaper and cheaper to make it, the average costs are going up, not down, because of competition. And I think you're going to see the same kind of thing happening in both K-12 and higher ed. In some sense, the free is the enemy of the good. Right? In some sense, people who are really building the best Civil War content are probably going to want to get paid for it. And Ken Burns or whatever. And how we think about sharing those costs is important. The key is scale. Anything online, high fixed cost, low marginal cost. So it works when you get to scale. So people think of higher ed as a monolith. But of course, we in this room probably already know it's really a collection of sub-markets. You've got the 2-year schools, 4-year MBA programs, PhD programs, and at the elite, mid, and entry tier. Harvard Business School doesn't think of Phoenix nursing program as a competitor, right? Each one of those spaces is a competitive market, but there are, higher ed is a glom of those. Within each space is where the consolidation will happen. And so as people move into a competitive landscape here, I'd put it to you to think less geographically and less monolithically and think in terms of submarkets by content. In terms of marketplaces, there are really 2 ways to go. One is you dominate this space because you're big enough to develop really good stuff, so you're higher quality, which leads you to larger size, which leads you to more investment, and you start getting into the loop that made Amazon and other people online win. The other are really coherent marketplaces where there's sharing of content in various ways by a bunch of different schools. Those marketplaces are why I'm starting Noodle. The new venture, if you're looking for a preschool or a college, if you're looking for a fitness instructor, a tutor, a video on the quadratic equation, right now the search is kind of terrible. All over the education landscape are really crappy, inefficient markets. And they're bad for parents and kids trying to find something, and they're bad for educators and other providers trying to reach those kids. So the idea of Noodle is simply to be Google for education, to be LinkedIn for education. How do I put everybody in touch with everybody in a coherent way that's somewhat curated and smart and uses people's social network as well as good wizards? 5 more suggestions, and I'll stop. First of all, the people in ed and ed tech who fail will be because they're too little. They're going after little problems that aren't really a company and really aren't a product. They're really features. And they're not using data well. And I don't just mean big data. There are a couple companies using big data well. A lot of them don't. I mean little data. I mean people actually doing the hard research behind their product and making it clear why it's better than what's out there. The other reason that people fail, I think, is this is the slowest moving marketplace on earth. Like selling to districts, you just want to kill yourself. Selling to schools, universities, from the time you meet them to the time you sell is easy a year. And even parents, this is a trust-based market. This is my kid. I don't want to hear about your MVP, right? Like, where's your research? Where are the people who say it's good? All of that combined means you've got to have enough funding and you've got to have enough expertise across both technology and education and sales to survive those first couple years and harden yourself. The second thing is really know your exit. When you start, am I building something that we're going to hope to sell to Pearson? Am I building something that might one day be public? Like, who's going to buy it? Jay Walker, who founded Priceline, every company he starts, he knows exactly the company he's going to sell it to, and he builds it around that. Third is the marketing landscape is unbelievably cluttered. And there are all the usual SEO, SEMs, stumble upon all the things you already use. Don't forget branding. Education brands are hard. In fact, Coca-Cola is about 125 years old, plus or minus, as a brand. The best universities, are between 100 and 300 years old. The number of education brands that have been created in the last 100 years, you probably put on one hand. And so you got to be really thoughtful about branding, and perhaps be thoughtful about partnering, which is why when I did Tutor was named after my dog Tor. It was a non-brand. The thought was, we're Georgetown, we're USC. Think about who are the brands out there, how do you partner with them in a coherent way? And finally, I'm not a huge believer in the lean startup. I gave a talk where I talked about pudgy startups. And all I mean by that is to have the expertise in-house and the patience in-house to build something that survives that kind of trust threshold that I was talking about. My final comment, things sometimes go wrong. And in fact, I'm speaking to a bunch of entrepreneurs, and so all I just wanted to sort of tell you is things will go wrong all the time, a lot of them having to do with running out of money and the fear of running out of money. And you should just know that it's really hard, and everybody who has started a business and everybody who's starting one now is having the same 4 a.m. Bad time that you are. So if that's helpful, I hope it is. So with that, I'll take some questions. It was that complete? Yes.
You talked about Noodle, the curating part of it. There are other kinds of things like Wolfram Alpha that tries to curate its knowledge base as well. What's the special sauce of the ingredients that go into the curation process?
A lot of this starts with bots and starts with just scraping and trying to figure out what's out there. Some part of the curation is being responsive to user feedback and as the community grows to that. But there's some part that is blocking and tackling. What's the Better Business Bureau data? And are you putting up companies that fail on that level? What's the, if somebody says they're a great tutoring organization, there are ways to just check in with local counselors, look for experts around the country, and vet people. I think it's really important to try to build a marketplace that is, that sort of there's a lower threshold below which we're just not interested in putting somebody up there. You don't need 3 million ways to learn the quadratic equation. You need 5 or 10 that actually are useful.
Both mics are open. If people could move to the sides, that'd be great.
So you were talking about the consolidation of space. I'm going to take the initiative because no one was there. And you also talked about exit strategies. There was a great article that talked about how education companies, there's a plethora of them, and none of them have the exit strategy. Do you say that the consolidation of the space will happen because people figure out how to exit, or will there be something else that drives it?
Well, they're two different markets. I'm saying that there's going to be a consolidation in higher ed of universities.
Sure. That
we have, 1,400 four-year schools of some size, and that might be half as many a decade from now. In the ed tech space, look, startups fail, right? And they consolidate, and not all of them are going to be Pearson. In terms of the exit of these companies, I would just put it that it's not about getting to Series A. It's about having a plan to actually exit, to either sell your company or to take it public. Like, where is this company going?
Right.
And specifically what I mean is, what's the space we're taking and how defensible is it? Right? Is this something that somebody just adds a feature because it's such a slow-moving space, you're never going to have a technological edge that lasts? Right? And none of this is really patentable. I mean, all the adaptive stuff, those are all long, long expired patent protections. So you have to have something, a user community, something that can survive Pearson one day saying, yeah, we'll just add that to our textbook adoption or something. That's on him.
Oh. But the consolidation of the space, that's really more what I was interested in is...
Actually, this space, I think, might go the other way. I actually see school districts fragmenting for a lot of different reasons. I think the notion of a school district has failed and is being seen as such by thoughtful people. And the notion of like 3 textbook companies ruling everything makes sense in a textbook adoption model for a lot of different reasons. When you're selling to a large institution, it's better to be large.
Sure.
When you're selling at a school level, and the charter schools, like it's only a small percentage of the schools, but A, they're doing the most interesting stuff, and B, it's already a pretty big market, right? For any startup, we can all ride with that. We don't have to go after New York City and LA. So in that, there might be a whole bunch of different players. My hope is that the people thinking about marketplaces create level playing fields. Just a quick thing, the porn industry. No, think about who's made money in online content, right? And they win.
They have the power URLs.
And they started in 1995 or so. There were really 2 companies of note that had websites and good reputations and so forth. Then there were a couple little smattering companies. 5 or 10 years later, there were 300,000 porn sites, right? And those 2 companies were out of business. So the internet generally consolidates, but there are instances where if there are the creation of really good marketplaces, and in that case there were, the things can flip pretty hard. And I think there might be room for more content companies than you think. There shouldn't be one SalCon, there should be 100,000 of them.
Yeah, excuse me. I was interested in your discussion of the future of higher education and Moocs. And I kept thinking, I actually teach undergraduates at Cornell, and I realized that we don't actually hire based on professors' ability to teach. We hire on professors' ability to publish. And so a lot of the reason why people come to Cornell is not for the teaching, it's for the credential. It's for the filtering effect. To say it's basically a badge on your record. And so the way that Moocs are often described are, it's about learning and giving people the tools, et cetera, but in a lot of marketplaces, especially in software development, et cetera, it's where you went to school and your network's associated with that, and the Moocs can't necessarily account for that. So I'm just really curious as to, I'm sure you've thought about this.
Yeah, I mean, there are 2 things just to think about. First, the notion that schools should be relatively inexpensive is just the credential is this artificial construct that's what makes it so expensive. I think it's not right. These schools very fiercely think about what students they want, right? So half the win of being at a Cornell is their selection process and putting you with other smart kids. But there is actually some good teaching that goes on there, both in the classroom and out of the classroom, and a consistent effort to vet you that when you get their diploma, you now represent them. I mean, I'm personally, and this is going to make me unpopular, I think, with a bunch of you. In my professional life, I am O for HBS. I've actually never hired somebody who went to Harvard Business School and was successful in my companies, right? So at some point, I stopped hiring HBS grads, right? Like a lot of business schools, but just that one, I for whatever reason, it's not a fit. Like to some degree, that brand matters. Like somebody comes out of the school and employers start seeing, yeah, those guys generally outperform. I want more of them. I want fewer of this guy. And I think that's a long-term process. It plays out over decades. the notion of a new school coming in and just saying, we're going to be as good as anybody else because we've got these great lectures. Maybe, how fiercely are they evaluating the students coming in? How are they working with them all the way through? What's the socialization process that's happening, again, out of the classroom? I think all those things make it pretty hard to compete with good schools.
Hello. You mentioned both badging or lack thereof and certification. Do you have insight into what the future of certification in the digital space, in the Moocs, or assessment in general could be?
I do. And I just start by sort of saying, where the testing industry a lot of times gets in trouble, and if you're thinking of testing kinds of solutions, you go to some of these testing companies, and they literally are wearing white lab coats. Like, there's no microbes floating around there, but they wear white lab coats because they think of themselves as scientists. They're trying hard to measure stuff, not to change it, just to be good at measuring. Once you attach high stakes to a test, everything changes. It's no longer about reliability and precision and accuracy. It's really about what did you motivate everybody to do. I joke a lot that as Princeton Review, I was the ghost of unintended consequences, right? Like, I'm your problem because I don't look at what you're trying to measure. I'm just there to teach the things that actually raise scores on your test, right? So when you start attaching stakes to badges, when you might get hired because of that badge versus some other badge, what are the consequences of that? What are people going to do? How's the cheating going to work? How does it all play? And I think a lot of the people, really well-meaning people who are thinking about badges, aren't really thinking about the test prep, the countermeasures. How's the world going to play out around those set of incentives? So I have thoughts as to how to do that, but they all have to start with what do we want to have happen, and how likely is it that each player will play?
Question.
So one of the points that you'd mentioned is about disaggregation or disintermediation of districts. Can you elaborate on that? I took that to mean that maybe there's charter schools that are evolving and a lot of the decision-making authority or buying authority is being delegated to those entries. Could you speak to that?
You look at Newark. 100% of their teachers are now tenured, right? They're so landlocked, so frozen. And meanwhile, more and more of their students are going to charters. I know new charters are opening up. And the district, I think they're spending $25,000 a kid. I mean, a lot of money, right? I mean, you could tutor every kid for that money. The question is, as the charter in any given region, and we're not talking about Scarsdale, right? We're talking about the 50 poorest and largest districts. As the charter movement takes hold, as those schools using stuff like new classrooms, using stuff like Dreambox, as they start doing hybrid right, and their costs are maybe 20, 30% lower, and their outcomes are better, and their kids are happier, and more kids are going to that model, like the districts kind of break, right? You tuck away all your problems in pensions and long-term health benefits, and that's okay as long as you're growing, right? Because the much larger group can pay those old bills. But when you're shrinking, it works hard the other way. And I think you're going to see a lot of these districts failing. At the same time, imagine if we just said, here in this state, we're going to allow every district to choose its schools. We're going to allow every school to choose its district. We're going to turn districts into networks, very much like KIPP. And in fact, we're going to allow KIPP, Green Dot, and other good networks to play as well. Like, how many schools would stick with their district, especially in those districts? And how does it play out? I think there's some really interesting models coming. And I just don't see the district model itself as viable. I think it had a certain place in the world at a certain time. And as we've moved, both for technological reasons and others, funding reasons, As you have state funding of education, it just doesn't work anymore and is unsolvable.
John, I'll take the privilege of the last question. So you talked about the Zoftig startup model, a little more heft, right? Given that most of these startups are cash poor, they're bootstrapping right now, what's one suggestion for them? What's one way for them to acquire a resource to build up that knowledge base or to build up that credibility to withstand that trust hurdle that you articulated?
There are a couple things that I was trying to allude to. The first one is to look for partners, but not like taking an investment from McGraw-Hill or Pearson. Looking for partners like a university, like an institution maybe outside of education who wants to play a little bit, so that you walk in with some branding. Number two, I believe in the incubator model. I believe that with good resources you can get up to speed on some of the issues that are really toxic if you don't understand them. And number three, I think people see Series A again as a goal line. And I think you've got to look past that and start looking to collaborate with other small companies and get to, this is a company we're building together that if we do get a Series A, we actually can build something that's defensible and smart. It can't be a business plan built on a hope that, that Series A solves it and that people will buy faster than they do. People make very slow purchase decisions here.
Okay. Please join me in thanking John for his great presentation.